enjoy Glide Time Foods because it is your brand. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And again, to summarize what you've just shared, first, you're looking good. So we give you kudos for that. Yes, so challenging the status quo. You mentioned, what if I do work in a dignified workplace, but I'm not fulfilled? And which poses a question, can we say that dignified and fulfillment sometimes is not in the same sentence? And what he went ahead to do is create his own fulfillment, which is a question that I pose to individuals also. Sometimes it's not always the responsibility of the employer to make you fulfilled. Is it your responsibility to venture out, have your own status quo, and create something? And we're talking about climate change now and external factors. But what Glide Time has done is, what about the individual? So what if we have all the trees in the world, but there's nobody left to breathe? There's nobody left to enjoy all the benefits that we have of taking care of the external world. So thank you so much, and it's great to see how you are challenging the status quo. So we will get into a few questions and just to talk more about dignified and fulfilling work. And I want to start off by asking Christopher and Philip, and we can start with Philip. How can we bridge the gap between formal education and the workplace to ensure that graduates not only find employment, but also experience work that is fulfilling and that aligns with their aspirations?
Thank you again, Tatiana. Really, the conversation today is about employability skills. And that's one reason why we had the summit, like I mentioned last month. In East Africa, for example, in 2014, there was a study by the Inter-University Council for East Africa, which then revealed that about 56% of our graduates were not job ready. Kenya, which was looking like the better neighbor in the region, was at 51%, meaning that more than half of the graduates in this ecosystem are not job ready, despite spending 4 years, 3 years, 5 years in the universities and colleges. Then there was the World Bank Enterprise Survey, I think a year after, in 2015, that then also revealed that employers were saying that 25% of people who are actually on job were not doing the exact thing they were supposed to do. The skills, the mismatch, and the inability to perform. A majority of this is not out of the training that these people are not really competent, but it's about people skills. Like we say, technical skills would get you hired, but the soft and people skills will get you fired. Because one thing that our institutions are not insisting on, and we are happy that as an academy we are walking this journey with them, is people skills, entrepreneurship, employability skills. Other than the classwork, the academic work that you do, the curriculum that was developed in 1990s before many people studying today were born, before 2000, are still being used to impart skills on you. And so the mismatch between how you are trained and how the workspace is culturalized now is quite different. And so one thing that institutions have to do to make our graduates more employable is to train on soft and people skills, essential skills, teamwork, working and being part of an ecosystem. Yeah. The other things that we are insisting on is on-campus innovation and entrepreneurship hubs. Because traditionally you are trained as a job seeker. But you get out here, in Kenya, for example, we are churning 1 million people out of our institutions every year. And you are competing against others, against about an ecosystem that can only take 25% of that number. So unless you're thinking entrepreneurially, unless you are innovating, unless you are providing a clear-cut solution that your classmates cannot produce, then you're not going to get a space in the workspace. So then entrepreneurship things help you think like the owner of the business, so that if you're employed by anyone, including government, then you're owning and you're part of that responsibility of making it work at the company. Yeah. The final thing that we have insisted on, which we are producing and helping people to work with, is data should inspire action. Yes, we were told by the Inter-University Council, we've been told by the World Bank, we've been told by the likes of KEPSA that our graduates are not meeting the right criteria and are not having the skills that are requisite for the employment sector. But how are we transforming our institutions? How are we revising our curriculum? One thing that we've done at the summit was to come up with the East African Employability Policy Brief that then seeks to point at the gaps on what government could do, what the region could do, what employers could do. And one thing that we've said is employers must also go out there. Like we run to invest in, corporate social responsibility, investments in health, in other sectors. We must go out there and mentor students, mentor people that we are looking to hire, so that we don't expect that the universities and higher learning institutions or out of school institutions are going to package them for us before we get involved, so that employers and the industry are not just involved in the tail end of accepting people into their spaces, but training on the job and training before recruitment. Lastly, is that as a commitment in working with the industry, there is what we call corporate mentorship and on-the-job training or job shadowing. One company or employer that is doing that in Kenya and in Africa is the DTB Bank. And we are glad that at the summit 2 weeks ago, they committed to absorb 100 of the students that were at the summit to go and get involved in their internship and job shadowing program. So we want more employers like DTB, like the Federation of Kenyan Employers, that are coming out to create room to support learners that have been trained by institutions to get the requisite skills, so that instead of castigating learners and job seekers or entry-level personnel, then we've contributed in their training post the classwork, post the university training, or post the colleges training. So the close interlink between universities and higher learning institutions, industry practitioners, mentors like ourselves, recruiters, government, must be harnessed and fostered towards ensuring that somebody does not get out of a higher learning institution and misses out in the job market. And by the way, if you are trained in Kenya, for example, you're only part of less than 5% of people with university degrees. In Africa, the continent of Africa, we have less than 19% that have post-secondary education. So you can see that the skill that you have is already unique. And like my colleague here says, there is only one you, and that one you must be a solution provider. You can't be trained for nothing. So whether the training is not fulfilling, whether the training does not meet the expectations of the industry, as an individual, again, you must up your game to ensure that the skill and the innate responsibility and skills that you have are able to solve at least a problem in the corporate space, in the social space. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Philip. And maybe to reiterate something that you mentioned, you talked about having an entrepreneurial spirit. And it does not mean that you are an entrepreneur, but having the leadership mentality in the workplace. There's a lot of individuality. There's a lot of me. But how can you use that position as an intern, as a manager, and have a leadership mentality? And in addition to that so what is the responsibility of the employer? And here we are talking about mentorship and training. Sometimes somebody walks into a role, they are 1 year, 2 years into the job, but are expected to have 15 years of information, which is impossible. So can we mentor, can we train the different young people in our organizations? Now, I know we have a few questions in the audience. We will have a Q&A session. I kindly request if we can note them down, and there'll be plenty of time to ask the questions, please, if that's possible. All right, next I wanted to go to Leslie. And Leslie, if I can change the question a bit and ask, how can we bridge the gap between formal education and individuals who want to be entrepreneurs, who want to have startups? That gap can be scary. Sometimes it looks impossible, and sometimes someone's inherent value is to be an innovator and maybe not to be employed.
Okay, thank you so much. First of all, I think I come from a very unique environment. Zimbabwe is a very unique environment. I think we all know that. It's unique in the form that there is a lot of volatility. We are in a VUCA environment. It's volatile, it's uncertain, it's complex, it's ambiguous, right? So what that has taught us, right, as a life lesson is we need to shift our orientation on what the government changed my job title. I no longer call myself the Chief Executive Officer. I now call myself Chief Opportunity Officer and Chief Execution Officer, because the gap is on opportunity identification and execution. So at the end of the day, I always want to do what we call introspection, right? To then say, as long as you have a qualification, whether it's a certificate, whether it's a diploma, whether it's a degree, a master's or a PhD, from wherever in the world, if you apply yourself correctly in an industry that you have interest in an industry that you think you can be competitive in, I will tell you definitely you can achieve greater, more and more than what you have imagined in your life. If ever you have dreamed to be an entrepreneur, entrepreneurship, like I've mentioned before, it's a very difficult space to get into. But you know where my comfort comes from? The same problem that I'm facing today, Nestle, Coca-Cola, Unilever, which other company, the big company, Kellogg's, they faced it 100 years ago. So whatever challenges that I have today, they are not unique. They are normal because that's the normal business cycle. So I think the attitude that we need to carry should be in such a way that we know we are entered in a space that is contested. Economists tell you that resources are scarce. And as young people, it's better for us to start looking for resources now. Because if we don't start competing for resources now, at the end of the day, in 2063, I will be 72. And probably if you are 26 today, just add 40 years, you'll be 60-something. So at the end of the day, if we are not careful, we will get to perish without transforming and living to the best of our capabilities. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Chief Opportunity Officer.
Philanthropies who, once we had done work for them, they would turn to us and say, hey, the work that you guys are doing would be so beneficial to our youth audience, right? And so through that, we started getting involved in, for instance, with MasterCard Foundation, the Baobab Summit, got involved in a partnership with them around a project we call Fail Up Africa, and have been doing a number of those projects. But the second insight we started getting from a number of our partners and clients was whenever we built our programs and ran our capacity building workshops, people would turn to us and say, you know, I wish I'd learned that earlier. You know, I wish I'd started, I wish I'd learned some of these soft skills. I wouldn't have been fired, you know. So that kind of became a push for us to realize that there's a need to do something significant in the youth space. So this year we actually committed ourselves to coming into the youth space and ask ourselves one critical question. And the critical question was, what can Near Delta do to significantly contribute to the issues of youth development on the continent? And we spent the last 6 months doing some research, trying to understand what is true about youth and youth development on this continent. And 3 things really came out for us as critical. The one was we got to really deeply understand the nature of the problem. And I think we all know this about how, you know, how fast the youth population is growing on the continent, how many jobs we need to create in the next few years for our young people, but also just the gaps, I mean the realities between the jobs available and the number of young people. So that was the first thing. The second thing, excuse me, was a critical understanding of the skill gaps, going back to some of these elements, that we are churning out a number of graduates with technical competencies, but often missing some of the essential skills. And I like how you use that. It's not soft skills, but essential skills that enable one to communicate effectively, collaborate. So that was the second piece of our work. And the third was also, though, the appreciation of the amount of people contributing to this work, right? I mean, just all the people sitting on this panel and the great work that's been done. In 2019, 126 new youth development programs were put in place. 2019 to today, we can speak about the billions that have been pumped into youth development from philanthropic organizations. But what was very clear for us when we did this research was the appreciation that even with the amount of resource, amount of organizations doing this work, we were very far from the transformation that needed to happen, right? The amount of unemployed young people was still massive. And so what we then decided to say is, again, asking that question, what's the one contribution we can make to the space? And on the back of that, what we realized is that the space that we can come in to contribute to is to support those who are doing the work already, to build capacity to do it at a more accelerated rate. And what that means, and one of my colleagues, Jake, who's here, he kind of describes it using the analogy of, I don't know how many of us have watched the movie Fast and the Furious, right? I mean, I think they're on what, 8, how many now? 12, yeah, right? They've got so many, right? But I mean, in the Fast and Furious movie, there's always that scene where they're all racing so fast and the person is realizing they need to go faster, but they've really just put on the accelerator and everything. And then they hit that NOS button, right? And then it enables them to accelerate, right? And what we realize is that there's so many organizations doing a lot of great work, but often have capacity challenges. So what we've built at Near Delta is a capacity building framework that is focused on 3 critical things that we saw in the space. One is the design of program and content. So helping organizations who are doing this work to accelerate or expand their design capability in designing their programs. The second piece was in then building capacity around facilitation. Right, on one hand is the number of people to facilitate the work, but also the capacity of facilitators. And the third was then end-to-end project and program management of these programs. And just quickly to speak to some examples we've worked with, you know, we've been approached by universities, for instance, and you speak, you know, Jose, Philip, about a number of universities realizing that, yes, they do the technical, but they're not equipping. So a number of universities like Elizade, in universities and high schools, like Elizade in Nigeria and Kegutu International Academy in Burundi have come to us to say, we're realizing we're teaching well, right? But we're lacking that entrepreneurial leadership program. So we are now their partners in designing their entrepreneurial leadership program that is integrated into their engineering program, into their science program, right? So that's kind of the one area of work we're doing. The second area of work we've been doing is supporting, again, initiatives such as the Amahoro Fellowship. Amahoro is an amazing organization who have gone into the refugee space on the continent and have really thought about how do we get public and private sector interaction in the refugee space to accelerate solving refugee issues. And one of the things they launched last year was a fellowship program which is about finding high potential refugee young leaders and taking them through a 12-month fellowship. But again, their expertise is around refugee management, refugee thinking, but then they thought, who could help us design a power-packed at the level of the Nelson Mandela One Teacher Washington Fellowship kind of program. And this is when Nia Delta was able to step in and say, we will then step in, design your curriculum, facilitate the program, manage your M&E, and then support you in taking that work further, right? So that's kind of the nature of the work that we've done and how we've now thought of coming into the space as, you know, the nose on the Fast and Furious car, or the Mr. Miyagi in the Karate Kid who's like supporting the hero to do his work even more effectively and more powerfully. And that's our commitment, right? Frantz Fanon says, you know, out of every generation, out of relative obscurity, discovers its mission, fulfill it or betray it. And we at Nia Delta believe that the mission of this generation is to solve the employability problem. And that if anyone is alive in this generation and is not losing sleep over that issue, you are not doing enough, right? And we think that, yes, we can do all the corporate work that we're doing, but if we are not contributing to the employability and the youth development issue, history will fundamentally judge us. And that's how we think about our work.
Great, thank you. Thank you. You've touched on refugees. And when we think of youth, youth is not one type of person. So we have refugees, we have people with disabilities. So what are the different underserved populations of youth that we also need to focus on? Now, I know our panelists and team for the next session are here with us. Thank you so much for coming in on time. Please bear with us. We are almost wrapping up. I had a question for Christopher before we move on to Hosea. So Christopher, jobs for graduates. What's a common theme that you see among graduates that they are lacking, or that you would advise them to take on before they go into the workplace life?
Thank you so much. I cannot emphasize a continuous everyday learner, and we learn even beyond our classroom setup. And I think what we need to emphasize, especially for graduates and for students who are preparing to transition, is to learn beyond the classroom and make sure that they equip themselves with what they do. I spoke about earlier the first entrant. You might have all the skills, but the first point of entrance is, how do you sell yourself? Do you have the enough CV? Because if you are advertising for 4 posts and everyone in this hall is applying, we are going to select only maybe 10 to shortlist. But do you have enough? Fair enough, you have the CV. Are you able to sell yourself before a panel? To say I'm the right candidate and I equate to what I wrote in the CV, and also to be able to perform, because sometimes we do receive reports from the employers that we work with that young employers, they do lack to participate in the world of work or in the offices because we spend too much time in the phone, or we don't simple things such as to align. And then I would like to say the other element that we need to do is to establish a mentor or a career development, someone that can do. For us, what we've done is that we've got people within our platform that has identified people to assist them to get their first job into the market, and also to do the job shadowing so that they can at least get a gist of what to say. If I'm into marketing, if I'm into HR and into engineering, what does it mean to do? And the other part that I would say is that we need to utilize the issues of the social media and access to information. That's where we spend much of our time, and this is should be perceived as our classroom and working classroom, because for us, we are thriving in that space to say every Tuesday without fail. One, we provide the job readiness skills at our office in Gaborone, and we also live stream it in our social media. And at any point, you can go to our videos and take notes to say, if I want to do public speaking, if I want to learn, and we do referrals. Another one is that we utilize partnerships. We have a Monday program on the radio to talk about these issues, opportunities in the international space, how to ace your CV, and all that element. And I cannot also emphasize the element of partnership to say, we might be all doing everything, but at times we strain the young people that we are trying to assist. So partnerships are very important for young people to do. And lastly, volunteer. volunteer, volunteer. I know we are hungry for success, but if you listen to successful people, sometimes they showed up without pay so that they can learn that missing skills. Sometimes it's okay to volunteer and avail yourself so that you can be able to learn and get that required skills to get you propelling. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much for that contribution. You mentioned learning every day. Sometimes we put the responsibility on learning on everybody else but ourselves. So yes, we encourage you to ensure you're learning. You've mentioned many tools that we can learn. Sometimes it's not just from your laptop, not just from the TV. There's also the radio. We still have radios, believe it or not, and there are still people reporting all sorts of information on radio. Again, there's so much information, and access to information these days is much, much easier. So yes, we encourage you to learn. Now, Hosea, as we come to our final question, how might we embrace technology and innovation to ensure that we can fully participate in an increasingly employment for youth?
Thank you, Tatiana. Maybe to start with, when we talk of technology and innovation, one of the things that we must always remember, if technology has to be successful, and many times it is not successful, it must answer to solving a problem that is existing. And number two, it must also answer to a problem that is coming tomorrow, because tomorrow it is the problem that will be there the day that we shall be living. So innovation and technology must answer to these two things. I want to appreciate this forum because we are talking of boundaries, opportunities, and Africa and Africans, this is our time. It is our time to build the world, not to build Africa, but to build the what? The world. Because if you look at the statistics and the age of the world, Africa is the only continent that is actually predominantly young. And if we are to be relevant, we must have the skills that are relevant not for Kenya, not for Zimbabwe, not for South Africa, but skills that are relevant for the world. And therefore, for us, innovation must answer to the needs of the world. And if I look at it, one of the challenges that we are dealing with is unemployment. And unemployment is because the skills are not matched, as the other speakers have said, but what can technology do to ensure that we have the matching of the skills and the opportunities? As I indicated before, for toolkits, our approach to linking employment and skill is doing a study on the needs in the industry, and therefore going back to the drawing board, the training center, and finding how can we make employees of that company specific. So there are two levels, I would say. Innovation and technology can contribute to creating dignified jobs. And number one is preparing during the training to have technology that is bridging the skills that are required. And number two, having a possibility of production within the training that helps them to produce what they go to the employment opportunity. So, case study of toolkits. In 2020, during the COVID, one of the employers that we had was developing and fixing saunas into buildings and hotels, and was saying, we have tried and looked for people, technicians, who can do a sauna from college. They don't exist. So please don't speak to us. Go back to your place and think twice. And we say, that's why we came. What are the skills required in the sauna? So when we got all the skills required in the sauna, there is no training we had in the center that could apply that. So we partnered with an institution, a company that is developing technologies, and we gave them the problem of the sauna, and another company that had challenged us with giving them technicians for building the bodies of the train. Okay? In Kenya, I don't know whether you have ever had a school that trains that. So they develop us a software that simulates the sauna, and you can be able to power the sauna inside a classroom with the Oculus glasses. So when you wear the Oculus, you are put into the industry where you are fixing the sauna. And therefore, the trainees are able to fix the sauna when they are in the training. By the end of the training, when they go to the sauna, they are not looking for where appliances are at the rooms. They can be able to tell you, this is how we go about it. They can even draw for you, end quote. In the same case, we simulated, through the software, we can simulate the train. And the different parts which are not seen by the passengers. And therefore, the technician can be able to fabricate and knows every part of the train. So, innovation and technology should be able to give the skilling part and the knowledge and the skills that are able to respond to the challenges in the industry. And if they can respond to the challenges in the industry, consequently, they can be able to get that employment that is decent and a good pay. In summary, to say, anybody who has not heard of Toolkit, you better go online, www.toolkit iSkills for Skills and Innovation. Look at the technology I'm talking about. Number 2, if you are a Kenyan, you don't have to go online. Come to Kikuyu and see the technology itself. If you have a cousin who needs a decent job, you need just to bring them there. And we are able to send this year, from September to December, we have sent 11 young people, Class 8 leavers, not from 5 leavers, 11 of them to France in a company that is making trains. So that is what technology and innovation can do for the skill part. Thank you.
Great. Technology will not stop us. We keep moving. Thank you so much for the youth. You've seen how Hosea has pitched himself, so kindly go to Kikuyu, and that is how you do it. But yes, following what you've just shared now, it reminds me of something. There's a difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is having the information, and wisdom is the ability to utilize that information. And that is the gap. So thank you so much for sharing that. Now we will have only 2 questions. I'm sure we have so many questions, but we'll only... I take that back. Unfortunately, we do not have an opportunity to ask questions. However, the panelists are here, and you will be able to speak with them right outside the tent so that we can have time and space for the next panelists to come on board. But for now, I want to thank you all so much. This was a fantastic session, and it was a pleasure for me to moderate with you. So thank you all, and have a fantastic day ahead.